Okay, so the first thing that I like to do on these artichoke bags is quilt around, and one thing I've noticed is that I don't like to have just one line of quilting. It's fairly forgiving. You just need to outline your shape somewhat. I think generally more stitching is better than less. Sometimes my lines touch or even overlap, but I try to do it in a way that looks intentional, and of course you're stitching on the fly, and so you're going as quickly as you can. So I'm just going to stitch this out. The next stage after this is quilted is to paint around the artichokes, and I like to outline the outside of the artichoke at least twice. That way I have two lines that I can paint in between. It's nice if you have something you can follow. I made a mistake and put 3 artichokes on this purse and then realized that I normally do 2 of them. It just goes back to that thing where I'm aware that I don't do my best thinking while I'm filming, and I don't write a script. I attempted to write a script on one video, and what I found was that I was making a plan to do things the way I think I do them, but when I watch myself just working, I learn every time that I do a lot of things I don't know that I do. I just do them when I'm creating. And so I'm attempting to always have a basic plan of what I'm going to do and then sit down and just make stuff. And then that way I catch on film what I really do, and I try to go back and do close-ups and things like that so that you can see the creation process as it works for me. Because I think it is informative to other people, especially people that really want to develop their fiber art skills, but don't necessarily know how to get started with that and how to begin building the confidence to do it. Here I'm showing that sometimes when I'm doing these peacocks and rivers, I like to, for the river part, set my machine in sort of an odd way so that I have a little wiggle in my line. And I've got it set to a stitch at the top using a sewn-out zigzag. Of course, with these sorts of improvised strategies, you have to test sew and perhaps start out walking your needle slowly and make sure that with the stitch you're using and the foot that you're using, your plan will work and that you're not going to end up hitting your foot because you're using a stitch that's intended to be used with a particular foot and you're doing something that won't work. So please carefully test things at a very slow speed before you start free motioning as quickly as you can when you're using your machine in an improvised way that's not specifically recommended in the manual. But I've got my needle set a little bit over like you with a width like you do with a zigzag, and I free motion that way. I often free motion with something other than just my needle stationary in one position. Then I'm going to take it over to the other machine and add some metallic. I'm trying to be mindful of the areas at the top and the bottom where my quilt extensions and my boxed bottom will be. I could have marked this with chalk so that I had an idea of the areas, but I'm just sort of winging it. Here I am putting some metallic thread into my bobbin, and I'm going to stitch with my piece flipped over and put a little bit of this teal blue thread into my piece. To do this, you need to bypass your bobbin tension. I have a second bobbin case that is set very loosely to allow for these thin metallics to go through without pulling on them. You might need to look up specifically for your machine how to do this. And because I can see my bobbin thread before, if I stitch underneath my previous stitching, I should be able to get it to be placed where I want. So I'm going to go a few times, and I'm going to go in sections. I'm going to go for a while, go back, because I don't really like to go all the way across my piece and all the way back. So I'm just going to kind of go in sections. I'm just going to kind of get a look. You see that metallic on the front? So you can see what that looks like on the front. Since I've been using this machine so much, I've been noticing how bouncy this table is. If I wanted to, I could be using a different color thread here, and then I would actually be able to tell more easily which lines were my original stitching and which were this new metallic. After I finish stitching underneath the artichokes, I decide to do a line of sort of a rolling meander above the artichokes, and so I do that, and when I finish free motion quilting in the next clips, you'll be able to see the metallic as I'm moving my piece through the other machine. At this point, all I want to do is cover the ground with visually interesting shapes using different colors of thread. I'm just using construction weight thread here just to maximize the durability of this purse. I have habitual shapes that I do over and over, and I'm sort of relying on those for this piece. I usually like to mix it up. When I make these, I like to work on anywhere from 8 to a dozen pieces, stitching white on each of the pieces and then moving maybe to tan or to a variegated thread and working down the stack, doing different elements in the same color as I go, so that by the end I just have to figure out what to do with a few of the pieces. Most of them are finished along the way. Here you can see the gold that I added to my artichoke areas that are shaped like teardrops. I think it adds a lot over just what I had originally from the first printing of my stencil, and I did lay my stencil over it when it was dry to add that gold. So I'm just filling this space up. Sometimes I do it intentionally so that I'm creating areas that I'll paint. A lot of times I'm just going for the visual interest of the stitching itself. Sometimes I'll add parts that are the raw edge applique. It really just depends. Often elements are added because of some problem that happened along the way, and there will be a technique that is perfect for sort of covering that up while adding interest at the same time. Here I'm following through with a little bit of what is actually a yellow thread, and when I finish this I add some that is green, and then I'm ready to go. This piece is unbasted. I generally work unbasted except for with very large pieces, wall hangings. I always baste my backing to my batting, and I work with the top loose generally. I'm less interested in using chemicals as time goes on, and so if I need to baste I will, but I generally try to get by without it. You can see how pretty the metallic looks on this piece. This is Lumiere by Jacquard. It's the same folks that make that ink we had last time. I think what I might be going for is this kind of brown with black. While I do this painting, I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of perfection and, you know, wanting the things we make, our fiber art, to not be flawed in any way. When I look at my work as I'm doing it, you know, I'm a little more self-conscious creating with the camera on, and I notice every little mistake as I go, and I worry sometimes about the reaction some people might have. I'm trying very hard to pass along information, in some cases, that I almost feel like I should keep to myself. Some of the things that I do to make things look the way that I do, I spent a long time experimenting and a fair amount of money buying the supplies and the equipment to try to work things out. And so there is this part of me that wants to hoard everything and keep it to myself. But I don't know, I think ultimately I believe in putting good energy out into the world. I believe in passing things along. And I believe in trying to be a force for something positive. At the same time, I would say that when I look at a piece of my artwork, whether it is a purse or something for the wall or something more functional like a really fancy pot holder or oven mitt, I think about, I think it would be sad if these types of creative endeavors didn't exist in the world because whoever made them, whether it's my work or something completely different that someone else is making, but if the maker of those items felt that a flaw here and there made it so that they would rather not put their creativity into the world at all. Last Saturday I spoke to a group of women, mostly quilters, at the local art museum about raw edge applique and intuitive sewing. One of them said what a relief it was to find out that, in my opinion, things didn't need to be perfect, and she specifically said, we're always told our points need to match. I just feel so passionately that creativity in life is a godsend. It's spiritual to be in the zone and be really creating things that speak to our hearts as we're doing them and as we look at them later and experience them. And I believe so much in us empowering each other to create and not being the bearer of the bad news that it's not good enough. It's good enough. It's good enough. I really believe that it's good enough. We've all had something at one time or another that had a flaw, whether it's a design flaw or a little mistake in part of the decoration or whatever, where we're aware of that little part that's not perfect, but it's still something that we love and that enriches our lives and that we're very happy to have in our daily life, even though it's not perfect. And that's the way I look at my art. It's never going to be perfect. If I needed every one of these pieces to be perfect before I could send it out into the world, I would never finish anything. I would never put anything out there. I've gotten so much kind, appreciative, and just wonderful feedback from people who have felt that their lives are enriched by my artwork. And so please don't peck yourself to the point that you can't produce things. Don't see only the mistakes.